is if you do have a question or you want to say something, raise your hand up and I will give you the chance to say something, whatever you want to say, and then I'll have to relay it to the rest of the class and answer your question. And also, if any point in time you are unable to hear me, please just also raise your hand or type out in the chat window that you cannot hear me or you cannot see whatever issues that we might encounter. Again, we are piloting this, so if we do have issues, it would be best for you guys to let us know so that we iron it out as soon as possible. How do we access the attendance register? You go onto ULink. That's where you, I think this first bar allows you to go to Blackboard. In those tiles, there should be one of the tiles that says attendance. So if you click on that, it's going to ask you for a code. You fill in the code that's currently on the screen. Which laptops do you use if you don't have personal laptops? Unfortunately, which labs? Sorry, I read that wrong. They are the D labs. You can use the D labs. They are open labs for the varsity, unless if there's something going on. And last week, I think we had student registrations. You guys did your student cards there, right? D labs, yeah. So after, I think that is done now. So the D labs are open as open labs. So in the instance where your computer can either not handle Visual Studios, or you're using a Mac, or you don't have a computer at all, you can use those open labs. On Fridays during the practicals, we do have our own labs in E-Ring, so you don't have to worry about the practicals. But during the week, if there's something you want to do, you can definitely use the D labs. So as I said, with the weekly practicals, we do have labs on campus dedicated for us. So it is a class, just like any other class where not everyone gets access to that class. Just a select few people will be able to do that. Unfortunately, if you're attending online, you won't have access to those labs on a Friday afternoon, but you can definitely come in on any other day and use the D labs. If it doesn't, okay, there's a question that says my Visual Studios does not open the design. There could be one of many reasons why that is the case. Unfortunately, I do not know. As I said in one of the tutorials, neither me nor Prof. Lim work for Microsoft, so we actually have no idea what's going on. You can try and uninstall it and reinstall it again, but chances are your computer might not be strong enough to run Visual Studios, so you'll have to use the lab computers. Okay, we have just under a minute remaining for the attendance. The ones that just came in, please make sure you do the attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to police this, but please make sure there's a space between you and the person sitting next to you. Okay, these COVID rules are there for a reason. Try to spread out as much as you can, no matter how friendly you are with your friend. There's more than enough space around here in front. Okay, online people, you don't have to worry about that. I don't really care who you're sitting next to. Will the session be recorded? The session is currently being recorded. So yes, it is recorded and uploaded to ULink. I'll show you where to get the recordings now. It's fairly simple. The same place where you get the subjects, that's where you get the same panel where you get into the online class is where you get your recording. So I'll show that to both classes, the one that's online and the physical class, because you guys are going to eventually attend online as well. 14 seconds remain. So ideally, again, the view that I'm going to show you and the view that you guys have are different views, because obviously I'm a lecturer and you guys are students. Just give me a second to log into Blackboard quickly. So when you navigate all the way to Informatics 1 on Blackboard, which usually looks like this with far less options for you, but ideally if you, let me just go to that page, if you go to on the panel here on the left, you have Meet Your Lecturers. Has everyone watched those videos? Yeah. Okay, great, because it took us a lot of time to make those videos. Meet Your Lecturer and Tutors. We haven't uploaded the tutor information as yet. We will do that at a later stage. Live lectures. So usually when you attend online, you click on live lectures, and live lectures will take you to Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. Okay, here is where all the classes are highlighted. Currently, we are in we are in lectures on Thursday. There's lectures on Monday, lectures on we've got lectures on Monday, lectures on Thursday, and we have the tutorials. So remember, because there is no online class on Wednesday, we don't have a slot for that here. And just to get to recordings, there's one of two ways. You can just simply click on recordings under live lecture. And this is okay, not all the recordings are here. But if you go back to live lectures, and on top of live lectures here, before you get into an actual class, there's this little burger menu. Can everyone see that burger menu? If you click on that, you have sessions. These are the current sessions that are running. And underneath that, you have recordings. So if you click on recordings, here is the Tuesday tutorial that is available on there. Eventually, when this fills out, you won't be able to find all of them on this page. That's why you have this recent, or you can say recordings in a range. So eventually when we do have a lot, it's not all going to populate on the same page. Then you can choose from which date to which date do you want to populate, and then all of the recordings will be there. You can watch the recordings straight on Blackboard, or you can download them to your device, depending on what situation you're in. So if you're on campus and you want to watch it on campus, then by all means, watch it on Blackboard. There's no reason for you to download it. But if you are catching a bus, catching a train, or going home, and you just want to have it for future purposes when you're at home and you don't necessarily have the data required to watch it, then you can download it to disk. All depends on you. So basically, if I go back one, you'll see again recordings. Under recordings, you have this little. I have more options than you, again, because I'm a lecturer. I can delete them or copy the link. But here's download, here's watch now. So there are your two options as far as the recordings are concerned. Okay, are there any questions about recordings, ladies and gentlemen? Any questions about how to get onto Blackboard? Questions on how to get into class online? Yeah, there's a question there. What? Yeah, it says these are the recordings. How to get to online classes, log into Ulink, then navigate to Blackboard Collaborate. You've got all your subjects there. Click on the informatics subject, and this is what it will look like. So from there, just go to live online lectures. There's no download option for the Tuesday recording. There is a download option I just showed you, but if there isn't, I will check the settings and then enable that after class. Okay, moving on. Let me close this. We've all done the attendance register, so I'm going to close that as well. And we can get started with today's lecture. Okay, so today we are dealing with algorithms. Remember yesterday we went through the whole life cycle of a coding life cycle. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the algorithm. Still the same problem. To remind everyone, again, please book your practical sessions. The practical booking closes this afternoon. If you have not booked yet, we will also allocate you to a session. Chances are both session 1 and 2 are fully booked. The only opening is session 3, chances are. But if you haven't booked, give it a try and see if there is any space in either session 1, 2, or 3. If not, we will also allocate you. by 1 o'clock today, you will know which group and session you belong to. Okay, we've definitely covered this. Are there any questions as far as the booking is concerned? Yes, no, maybe, not at all. Okay, let's move on. So to recap our problem, our example problem from yesterday is that the University of Johannesburg would like you to assist them with a computer program that will be provided to learners to calculate the average of their grade 12 results. You may assume that all of the learners have 6 subjects and only 6 subjects. So depending on which class you were in yesterday, we may have tackled this in different ways. But this is very difficult. Let me just give me a no. It's not what I want to do. That, yes. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. So how are we going to go about this? So something along the lines of this. When we spoke about the algorithm yesterday, we said we all have an idea of what we need to do, but you need to break down that algorithm in such a way that it's modular and it makes sense. So you should ideally be able to give these instructions to someone else that has no idea what you're doing, and they should still get the same results. That's ideally what science is all about, right? So you ideally need to get 6 marks from the user. We did say the person who wants to get their average needs to provide you with their matric certificate, which says this is how much they got for each and every subject. And then we're going to add all of those marks together and get a total. So then from getting that total, we're going to then divide that total by 6 to get the average. That is the mathematics behind it. And then we're going to show the user the average. So yesterday when we discussed this in this class, did anyone ever get to a point where they said the last step is we need to show the user what the average is? No, we didn't. So all of us calculated the average and we kept it to ourselves. Okay, so that's where the whole algorithm thing comes in, where you need to then show the other person, or actually the person who asked you to do something, you need to deliver what it is that they asked you to do. So yeah, that's why it says in the next slide, how many of you forgot the last step? All of you forgot the last step. And other things to consider, no, what are we doing? Okay, so at this point, I'm sorry, I have 3 different screens here and I'm trying to navigate, orientate myself to them. It's going to take a while to get used to this. So another thing to consider over here is what would happen how would you change this algorithm if the person had 7 subjects? What are you going to change? What are you going to alter in this algorithm? Yes.
The first thing I would add to the very top is add an option for the user to tell you how many subjects they've taken.
That's a step to 4. They have 7 subjects. This is not let's say for argument's sake, everyone had 7 subjects. Okay. So it's not an optional thing. So what would be changed if everyone had 7 subjects? Yeah.
I just changed the number 6 to 7.
Okay. Where?
Divided by 6.
So you already divided by 7.
Yeah.
Gonna get the wrong answer. Divisor is 7 and extra subjects added to the sum. We have Van Rensbeck there, you're very wrong. And then we have Sturgeon as well, that says extra input 2. Okay, all of you are kind of getting there, but not really. So if the gentleman's idea over there, if I now divide this number by 7, am I going to get the right average? No. What do I need to do? Yes.
So don't you like add the 7th mark as well?
So you add the 7th mark. Okay, so I add the 7th mark, add them all together. I add the 7th mark, add 6 of them together, divide by 6. It's not going to give me the right average. There's a few people online there says, get 7 marks from the user, add 7, divide them by 7. Yes, we've got a Tobile there that says that. So we're not changing one thing here. We're changing the whole algorithm. So everywhere there's a 6, we're going to change that to a 7. So now instead of getting 6 marks from the user, we're getting 7 marks from the user. Instead of adding these 6 marks together, we're adding 7 marks together. Instead of dividing the total by 6, we're going to divide the total by 7. So which leads me to the next slide. Say, how would you change this if you were working with 10 marks? So we've just went through that. But now, then, what if there were 1,000 marks? 1,000 marks? Just because that number has more zeros does not make it more intimidating, ladies and gentlemen. It's still just a number. Okay. 7 marks instead of 6. Yeah, okay, I think your reply was a bit delayed there. Yeah. What do we do when it's 1,000 marks? Yeah.
Replace all instances of the number 7 with 1,000.
How long would that take you to kind of work out? A long time, right? It becomes a bit tricky now because the numbers we're working with are a lot of numbers. So let's consider this. We've got a hand up. Yeah, go ahead, ask your question. SZ Ruloti, your hand is up. Okay, your hand's down. Let's consider this. The more data points you have to deal with, the more frustrating this becomes. Because 6 subjects, just add 6 numbers together. You can even do it manually. It wouldn't take you that long to do. But once you start working with 1,000 marks, that becomes very tricky. What are the chances of you screwing that up? The whole average. It's like 1,000 times more, right? So the question then comes, how do you solve a problem with too much data? Do you get the how do you solve a problem like Maria reference? Let someone chuckle. Do you get the reference? Sound of Music, ladies and gentlemen. Go watch it. I was expecting more of a. Let's just move on. Yes, LT Zondo, your hand is up. Ladies and gentlemen, please raise your hands up if you want to say something. Don't just raise them up because I am, again, running 2 classes at the same time. So if you raise your hand up, I'm going to take my attention away from the people that are sitting in front of me to give you attention. And if you don't say anything, you've wasted everyone's time. You just did it again. In future reference, I'm just going to ignore you guys. Okay, so how do we deal with that? And the simple answer is boxes. Put stuff in boxes. Okay, sounds very manly, right? Because I watched that First for Women ad that said, men's brains are like boxes where we put everything in compartments. And women's brains are this wonderful, free-flowing pink goo. Anyone remember that ad?
Yeah.
Okay, so the answer is boxes. Anyone care to tell me why the answer is boxes? Yeah.
If something in your algorithm goes wrong, it's much easier to find where exactly it's going wrong.
Right? That's what if you put stuff in boxes, you can close one box and open another and just be able to deal with multiple things at the same time. But not just boxes. This might not appeal to everyone. What about this? The answer is boxes. Most of us just use our old ice cream containers, which doesn't make sense because you don't know what's in there until you open it. but the idea is the same, right? The idea is the same. What do you think is in the pasta container? Pasta. What are the chances of you opening it and finding something else in there? Well, it depends how your household is put together. But in a well-functioning society, chances are if the box or the bottle or whatever the container is labeled pasta, that's what should be inside that box, correct? I think we introduced the concept of arrays once there's too much data. No, we're not even doing arrays yet. Again, we haven't started coding, so we haven't done arrays yet. So if you have 1,000 numbers, you need to put these 1,000 numbers somewhere. You're going to put them in boxes, right? Like as you see over here, the 3 types of pasta. Each pasta is in its own little container. It's easier to separate your concerns. It's easier to see where what belongs. And in programming, these boxes are called variables. So I'm going to take you back to grade 12 maths. I know it's a very tough time, and you guys try to suppress those memories. But do you remember what variables are for maths? What is a variable? What is the mathematical definition of a variable? So I'm going to start giving you guys 3 chances to answer a question and listen. Because at this point, I'm just lecturing him. Anyone else? Variables. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it like unknown numbers?
Unknown number. Not really, no. No. Surprised you made it this far. Yes. A placeholder for a number. Right? You're going to create a space to say, this is a variable, I don't know what it is, but I know I'm going to use it at some point in my calculation. So I'm going to store a place for that. So it's a position holder. We've got an answer online that says it's a position holder for an unknown number. Yes, that's the same as the first gentleman said over there. So placeholder for unknown values. And also online people, it's not fun if you're going to answer my questions because you went through the slides and you saw the answer on the next slide. Okay. It's an alphabet used for an unknown number. Yes, it's a placeholder that's created to store something that at that point in time you don't necessarily know what it is. Right? So where are our variables in our algorithm here? Hint, hint, it's the parts that I break. Right? But does everyone understand why they break? So we get 6 marks from the user. Do we know what these marks are? No, we don't. Do we know how many we're going to need? Yes, we do. So what do? We reserve 6 spaces. Someone has their mic unmuted and it's causing an echo. Please mute your mic. Thank you. So we reserve 6 spaces. That's basically the idea. We don't know what these marks are. Some of you may not want to tell us what your marks were. But we know we're going to need 6 of them. So we're going to create 6 variables to store those 6 numbers. What else do we need? After getting these 6 numbers and adding these 6 numbers together, we're going to have a total. Okay. Do we know what this total is? Do we know that we need a total? Yes. So we create a variable called total. We don't know what it's going to be, but we know we're going to need a total. 2 variables for the total and an average. Yeah, and then for the average as well, do we know what the average is? No, but we know we need an average because that is the sum, that is the whole point of this exercise is to show the person their average. So now we've got a placeholder for the marks, 6 placeholders for the 6 marks. We've got a placeholder for the total. We've got a placeholder for the average. This is like, again, from yesterday's class when we talked about baking, right? When you start baking, you know you're going to need some eggs. You know you're going to need some flour, some milk, some. So you keep all of those ingredients around because you're going to need them at some point during the baking process, right? That's basically what we're doing here. It's like whatever woodwork or whatever project you guys are working on, you don't just, whatever it is you do in your spare time, you don't just sit there and start. There's most probably like a setup process where you go, I'm going to need this, that, and the other thing. Put those all together before we get started. Okay. So this is ideally what that looks like. So at the bottom here, we have, let me just get my highlighter. At the bottom here, we have space 1 all the way till space 6 for the marks. Then we have the total itself, and then we have the average. Okay. Everyone's okay with that? Everyone's happy with these variables and how we got to them? We've got a question. Why do we not have a variable for showing the average to the user when we have a variable for the averages? Okay, so when you're showing something to the user, do you need a space to store what you're showing the user? Well, yes, you need a space to store what you're showing the user. But what are we showing the user? What are we showing the user? The average. Do you have a place to store the average already? Yes. So do we need to store the average again when we show it to the user? No. So we've already catered for the average. We don't need to create another placeholder for it because it's already stored. The only difference between it and the total and maybe any other variable we're going to use is it's going to be shown to the user and everything else won't be, but it still serves the same purpose. Have I answered your question? I guess so. So what does this mean for coding, right? What does all of these variables mean for coding? But before we get there, let's just segue a little bit to this. Good programmers are people who take into consideration that they aren't the only individuals that will be working on their project. Chances are when you go out into industry, you're going to be part of a team. You might be front end, other people may be back end. You may be part of some architecture, other people are going to be part of other architecture. The idea is you're not going to be alone. You're going to be working on this whole thing by yourself, okay? They must be egoless and not have their mindset where they are a genius and so go out of their way to make sure that their code is not understandable to anyone else, because then it means they are so clever and other plebeians are too stupid and not worthy of their programmer's genius. You may be of this opinion. It makes no difference to me. The issue right now is the people who are going to be marking you on a weekly basis need to understand what it is that you're doing. It's not just presto, there's the average. Be happy I gave you the right answer. No, that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at how you got to the answer. And how do you think the person that's marking you is going to mark you if they don't understand what you did? Right? I personally am not going to give you good marks. I'm going to go, you grossly overcomplicated this. That's my way of saying I don't understand what you did here. Right? So the idea is you need to make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple. Again, because out there in industry, you can do what you want to do because maybe someone else is marking you and not my assistant, so I really doesn't matter to me. But we're trying to instill a way of working that you guys will make it will be easier for you and the other people as well. That's not the only reason. A good programmer will ensure that the code is easy to understand, which makes breaking the code down into smaller, breaking the code down into smaller, easier to maintain chunks. So we'll get to those easier to maintain chunks a little bit later, but it kind of goes back to the whole boxes thing, where if I have my, again, baking aid, if I have my dry ingredients box here, my wet ingredients box here, and all of a sudden, there is liquid on the floor. Which box is the cause for the liquid on the floor? The wet one, right? There's no reason for you to go into the dry ingredients box because you know that's not the reason that your code is crashing. Or that's not the reason that your kitchen is flooding, right? Okay? But we'll get to that later on in the module. And good programmers copy their code so the event that okay, someone again has their mic unmuted. Would you like me to have you teach this lecture? I thought not. Thank you very much. Let's continue. And comment their code in the event that one day they leave the company and then colleagues can continue to maintain their code with ease. You may be one of those people that goes, when I leave, this company is going down. No one's going to understand anything. Okay? But you're not helping anyone in anything. And chances are, with your luck, you are going to be the one that's put on an assignment or a project that someone else, just like you, screwed up. And here you are having to decipher lines and lines of code because you have no idea what this person was doing. It takes a lot to read someone else's code and especially if you don't understand where the logic comes from or what they were thinking at that point in time. This is not only true for other people's code, right? For those of you that are coders or have coded before, try opening something you coded 3 years ago. Tell me what the hell you were doing there. You don't know, okay? So you need to, my audio is not very clear. Can you hear me now? I thought we were done with these kind of, can you hear me now? Okay, great, I'm glad you can hear me. I won't stray too far away from my laptop this time. I do apologize. So yeah, if you just comment it out, if you just write, if this is an average calculator, it will save you at least 45 minutes of your time going, why is there 6 of these? Why am I dividing this by 6? What was I doing here? So I've had the same thing as well. Just going back to like code I did in 3rd year, I was just like, yeah, the person who coded this was very crazy and uneducated. Okay? Comment out your code. Makes it easier for you, makes it easier for the person sitting next to you. In the group, it makes it easier for the person that has to maintain your code as well. Okay, so but we'll get back to this in later on. And also, never forget to leave comments to explain what each line of code does. Well, each line of code is a bit too much. Are you writing a novel or are you writing code? Right? Not every single line of code. I'd say at every junction where you think this is a complex calculation, this is something that needs a certain level of understanding, then you can put a comment to go, A means this, B means that, C means that. So whoever's reading that piece of code will understand exactly what it is that you are trying to do. Okay. So points we are trying to make is make it easy to track your variable usage by whenever you are declaring variables, say what that variable is for. The reason why we want you to do this is because chances are if you create a variable and you have to write what it's for, and you can't come up with a reason for that variable existing, what does that mean? It shouldn't be there, right? Like the person that said earlier, should we not have a variable for displaying? So if you have display variable and you go, what am I going to store in this? If you can't answer the question, you have no reason to have that variable in the first place. Okay, make your code understandable. That I think I've emphasized that point. And divide up your code where possible. Make it easier to understand. Each and every calculation should be in its own little box. And. So it is good practice to declare your variables, any variables you plan to use. So certain coding languages allow you to just declare them as you go. So I need a variable, I'm going to declare it now. In Informatics 1A and Informatics 1B, we insist that before you start any coding, the top, you declare all your variables. This way, it kind of lets us know that you thought this through. You're not just winging it. You actually had to sit down and say, how many variables am I going to need? What is this going to achieve and how am I going to go about it? And yeah, so in Informatics 1A and 1B, we insist that you set your program up to enforce this to such a point that if you don't pre-declare your variables, your program won't run. And when your program does not run, we cap your program at 40%. Okay. Let n equal number of subjects. Okay, I think you guys are just having your own conversation in the comments in the chat window, but okay. So there are rules when it comes to naming your variables. Unfortunately, nature doesn't work like this. I wish we had rules for naming your children as well, because some children have weird names. Elon Musk's kid has one of the weirdest names I've ever come across. It looks like a verification code. I can't even pronounce it. So there should be rules to these things. And that's why we, in coding, we've come up with one of the few things we agree on is there should be rules. Okay, so at this point, there should be no spaces allowed. Okay, some of you who have spaces in your names, I apologize. There should be no spaces. No spaces, and it must start with a letter. So you can't start a variable name with a number or a special character. And thirdly, and most importantly, do not use reserved words. Okay, So if we're talking about it from maybe a religious point of view, a reserved word would be something like Jesus. That's reserved for the Messiah in the Christian faith. Okay, so that would be the same thing over here. Reserved words would mean any word that the programming language can interpret as something else. Okay. If you go over there, for instance, what is a reserved word? So these are keys that are reserved as a command in Visual Basic. So for instance, private. When you say private, when the compiler reads that line of code and sees private, it will see private as a reserved. Private means something to the programming language. So if you name your variables reserved words, the compiler is going to be confused between is this a name or is this a reserved word? Is this telling me something? Is it telling me to do something, or is it just a variable? So avoid doing that completely. So a little exercise. Which variable names are valid? Is the first variable name valid? No, why not? Starts with a number. Second variable, is it valid? Why not? Has a space. The third variable, is it valid? Why? There's an underscore, so there's no spaces. It's one of the rules we had. Are there numbers? Does it start with a number? No. Is it a reserved word? No. So how can you tell a reserved word? Usually, depending if you don't change your IDE too much, the words that will be highlighted in blue are reserved words. Okay. The fourth variable, is it valid? Yes. Good. Again, does it start with a number? No, it doesn't. Does it have spaces? No, it doesn't. So it's fine. Can have numbers after as long as it doesn't start with a number. The 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one? No, why not? It's a reserved word. Sixth one? Why not? Reserved word. The last one, seventh one? Yes. Should you really do that though? No, you shouldn't. So the idea behind, besides the rules that will be enforced by the coding language, you also need to make your variables easy to understand for you and whoever is reading your code. So in our example, for instance, if I said sub 1 mark, sub 2 mark, sub 3 mark, sub 4 mark, all the way till sub 6 marks, do you know what those variables are going to hold? You have an idea of what those variables are going to hold? Yeah. And if I have total and average. Okay, so if I have variable 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, do you know what these variables are going to do? No, it does not give you an indication of what you're trying to solve. So you need to name your variables in such a way that it makes it easier for you and the next person to tell, even before going through the code, to go, just from the variable names, I can kind of see what's going to happen here. Again, if you take it back to baking or whatever, or cooking, if you go home today and whoever is in the kitchen trying to prepare a meal, just by seeing what they took out of the fridge and the cabinet, you can kind of tell what meal is going to be prepared here, right? Same logic applies. So with variables, let's look at this. What does this tell you? Something else to consider. What is? So it's a not vector or boxes slide. Yeah.
Every variable must store its own thing. So
true, but not
only one
completely.
type. So only one type of thing can go into that variable.
Only one type of thing should be able to go into a certain type of thing. So right now when we do recycling, this is true for campus as well. Most of you don't care. But when you throw in something in some of the areas have dedicated trash cans with 3 different cans. One is for glass, one is for paper, and one is for organic. So the idea behind it is, again, you guys don't care, but the idea behind it is, if you are done eating your lunch and there's some food left in your lunch tin, don't throw it in the glass thing. please throw it in the organic one, because when we recycle these things, we need to recycle like materials together. Okay. So with that being said, what are we trying to say? We're trying to say declaring, which means declaring variables, saying I will be using these variables does not involve I will be using a variable called A, B, C, D. It requires that we indicate what type of data variable will be stored. When I take you way, way back, some of you sooner than others, but remember in kindergarten we had that little colorful box thing with shapes on them? And you have to put the right shape and the right thing in order to pass like grade 1. Okay, how many of us failed that? Don't be embarrassed, it happens. But the idea is the same. So what goes into the round hole? The circle, right? The sphere, rather. What goes into the square hole? The cube or the rectangle. What goes into the triangle hole? The triangle. Okay, I see most of us passed that. Same thing applies here. So if you know what you're going to store is a triangle, what type of storage space are you going to create? A triangle. Triangle stores triangle. Square stores squares. Circles stores circles. Same thing. So in Informatics 1A and the language Visual Basic, these are the variable types we will be dealing with. Integer is a whole number. Negative numbers, 0, and all of the natural other numbers are integers. We have a double. A double is a decimal number, so 1.0001 minus 20.330. Whatever you can think of that has a decimal point will be declared as a double. A string is a collection of characters, so character -1 with quotations and hello with quotations. So in Visual Basic, how you declare or how the compiler identifies a string is with quotations, not air quotes, but those actual quotations. We've got the last one is a Boolean, which is a true or false condition. Yes. Single quotation. Yeah, single quotation is comments, but we'll get to that. I'm sorry, online people. It seems none of you are saying anything in the chat window anymore. Are you still with me? Can you still hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. Let's continue then. So any questions about these? There are more variable types than this. We just simply don't care about the rest right now. Yes, there's a hand in the back. No, these are very generic. These are, I don't think there's any coding language that does not recognize these. Sorry? Isn't the double a float in what language? Okay, but does it serve the same purpose? Okay, am I teaching you guys in Python? That's what I'm saying. The wording may be different. That's why a certain word in my language and your language may not necessarily be the same thing, but it translates to the same thing. And if you understand what it is in one language, it's not too difficult for you to understand it in the other language, which is one of the reasons why we try to use Visual Basic in first year. It literally has the word basic in it. This is the most basic coding language you'll ever run into, right? It reminds me of one of my dad's buggies where the key would fall off as you're driving. The clutch was horrible. Everything about that car was just horrible. He sat me down and he said, son, if you can drive this car, there's no other car in the world that you won't be able to drive, right? Same thing applies. If you can drive this car, if you know how to code in Visual Basic, it does not get any more basic than Visual Basic. If you can do things in Visual Basic, there's no coding language under the sun that will confuse you. Yeah. It's true or false. It's a binary data type. It's like a question if I'm asking you, Are you dating someone or not? There's no maybe. It's yes or no, right? Are you pregnant or not? Can't be 40%. It's a yes or no situation. It's a this or that. It's a binary variable. Yeah. Any other questions? No. Okay. So how do you declare variables in Visual Basic? So we will show you where next week. So in your tutorial next week, we'll actually show you this. But the format is you start with the reserved word private. We'll get to why private later on. Your actual variable, what you want to call your variable, and as data type, whatever data type it is you're trying to declare. So the actual example would be private x as integer. Okay. Is X a good name? No, it's not. But in this context, it is. Why is it a good name in this context? Do we know what we're doing here? Do you have a problem we're trying to solve here? No. So X fits the thing. But if we're trying to do a total, it would be total as integer or whatever the case may be. So what data type would in our example, what data type would be our 6 marks? Integer. What data type would be our total? What data type would be our average? A double. The reason why it will be a double is because a integer can fit into a double, but a double can't fit into an integer. Again, we'll get to that later on. But ideally, what data type is the number 100? What data type is the number 100.0? Both of them represent the same thing. So do you see what I'm trying to say? What if I tried to put 100.0 into an integer, what would happen? It would literally cut off the 0. But it would still represent the same thing, right? But if I try to represent something like, this is more close to home. If I try to represent something like, remember, in order to pass, you need a 50. If you had a 49.8, and then I put that into an integer, what do you think is going to happen? Depends on language. But some languages will just chop it off. And then now, instead of 49.8, now you got simply 49. How many of you would be happy with that? So that's the reason why we would do it like that. It wouldn't work. 49.8 is a real number and not an integer. So are you saying an integer is not a real number? I don't think so. Okay, let me just read the rest of the comments. Can I also use float instead of double to declare my decimal numbers? No, you'll only use what we teach you to use. So we haven't, in these slides, we're not talking about floats. We're never going to use a float in Informatics 1. Okay, so for homework, what I want you guys to do is look at this again and declare which variables you're going to need. Just declare them almost as if you are actually coding it out. Okay, any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah. We have lab computers. If you prefer your own laptop, by all means, we can't guarantee that you'll be able to charge them because there are no free plugs, because the computers that are in the labs already are plugged in. So if your laptop has a good battery life, then you can bring it. We don't have any issues with that. Yeah.
Is it possible for us to bring multi-plug with so we plug that into all plugins and charge our laptop at the same time?
ICS is against you unplugging their machines to begin with. So unless if there is already an empty slot that you're going to use, and chances are no, most of them are pretty filled up. Unless if there's one free on the wall, but yeah, you just have to take that chance. But I would say the lab computers aren't that bad. They're really, really good. Rational numbers are double or floats in programming. That sounds like a math question. We don't work with that. What's the homework? It's in front of you. Can you still see my screen? Is there a way to enhance audio, especially the questions from the class? Not really. So in our next lecture, what I will try and do is when I get questions from the gallery that is in front of me, I will say that question again before I answer it. I do apologize for that. That is a talking point. I will make changes to that. Which labs are open for use? D labs are open for use right now. What is our practical about for tomorrow? You will find out tomorrow. Good. If there aren't any more questions, ladies and gentlemen, that is, we got like 5 more minutes. But yeah, that is our class. And I'll just stay on with the online people to answer the questions that you may have that weren't answered during class. So if you still have any questions that I did not manage to answer during the class, please do feel free to ask those questions. Recorded session available. It should be available at the end of today's class. Okay, actually we went over time, come to think of it. So sorry, I have to go.